Okay guys, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for joining me again for another video. So in today's video, we're going to be changing the oil in this 1956 Bedford Green Goddess. It should be a nice easy job. We'll empty all the old stuff, fill it up with some new oil, and then we'll get cracking. Okay, so the first thing I want to check before we actually start going through the process is let's have a look at the dipstick and see how much oil is currently in the Green Goddess. To release the oil dipstick, you're going to have to take off this side panel here, which is pretty easily done with just loosening off the various wing nuts that are around it. Once that's done, you can just lift it away. There you go, so that's your dipstick there. Okay, so as you can see, engine oil wise, we're definitely not full. I have wiped this off and re-dipped it, but we're definitely not at that full line, so let's get that oil topped up and replaced. Okay, so before we actually drain the oil out then, obviously we want to warm the engine up. The reason we do that then is because when we warm the engine up, we're warming the oil up. Once that oil is warm, it's going to be a lot thinner, which means it's going to be a lot more fluid, which means it should drain out a lot easier. As it's pumping around, it provides a little bit of agitation for the components in the engine, and hopefully any small contaminants or sediment or any small microscopic bits of rust will then be taken out when we drain the oil in a slightly hotter state. So you can do it one of two ways. First way is you can go for just a standard long drive and do it over time, or if you want to get it done quicker, crank the engine on, don't stick it in gear, and then just keep the revs fairly high. Shouldn't take too long, 5-10 minutes running it, and then we'll get started on draining the oil. Starts first time every time. Okay, so there's very few tools we actually need to do the oil change then. So I've got an adjustable wrench because I haven't actually got a wrench the correct size or a socket for it either. Empty 20-litre jerry can. It's definitely not full as we saw, so I'm expecting only probably 6, maybe 7 litres to come out. So this is a 20-litre jerry can, so it's more than suitable. Let's get going. Okay, so the funnel doesn't actually really fit, so I just have to try and line it up. Of course, it wasn't going to be easy. This is literally going to be the coolant all over again, isn't it? So the adjustable wrench can't get enough purchase on the nut, so I'm going to have to find a socket or an actual wrench that's the right size from somewhere else, which possibly means buying one. The problem is I don't actually know the size of this nut. So I figured out it's a 32mm socket. So we're going to try and do first is try and use a socket wrench, try and get it off that way. If that fails, I've got a lever and a rubber mallet, and we'll go with it like that. Let's try one last time. Okay. Right. Yes, got it. Okay. Now we've got the fun job of trying to actually catch the oil. So, stand by. Here goes nothing. Oh God. There. Oh, finally. Okay, so as you can see, we have spilled a bit. Okay, so to gain easy access to the engine oil filter, we've just taken off this side panel here for the engine cowling and unhooked the main engine cowling just for the clips there. And that gives us nice and easier access then to the engine oil filter just there. So to release this, all we've got to do is unscrew the retaining bolt on the very top. Because there's only one of me, I'm going to try and break the seal whilst in the cab from here. I'll then go underneath the vehicle and then use my fingers, reach up, twist it off, and hopefully try and catch most of the oil without making much of a spill. Aha! Right, so we've now loosened it off, so now I'll go underneath and properly remove it. There we go. That's what the what it looks like underneath. You can just see the little bolt just coming through there. Okay, so that's the actual filter element there. Then, as you can see, so obviously it screws into there, and you've got your main filter element, which will just lift out. So I'll do that in a second. But as you can see, it's obviously one of the older style. So unlike the new ones where it's all one sealed unit that just screws in, like you see on a more modern vehicle, the actual element inside is what you replace, not the entire thing. It actually doesn't look that bad. Okay, so there's the actual filter itself, filter element. Yeah, it looks pretty old. The oil looks a little bit thin, and that's not because the engine's been running for quite a while. When I'm taking this out, it's not been run for about half an hour. Thanks so much for the support you guys have shown so far. If you can all do me a favour, if you can subscribe to the channel and like this video, that'd be brilliant. So this one is made in the USA, and it is a Fleetguard Lima Foxtrot -530, and there's no obvious signs of rust or contaminants on the filter element itself or in the casing, which is great news because it means there's nothing floating about potentially damaging the engine. So all we've got to do is empty the rest of this oil, clean out the inside of the casing then with the instruction manual recommends either paraffin or clean petrol. So then it's simply placing the new filter element into the casing, putting it back on, and then screwing it back in. So the new filter then, so this one is made by Alco, so alcofilters.com, not sponsored, and I didn't buy it directly from them anyway. The exact make is the Mike Delta 057. You can see the two filters pretty much identical construction, and they are pretty, they're simple bits of kit but quite effective. And that's the filter element done. Then we'll replace the drain plug and then we'll refill the oil. Before I move on then, just a quick shout. If you stay to the end of the video, what I'm going to do at the end of this video is I'm going to have a brief discussion about some of the things that I've done wrong during this video, or not necessarily wrong, but some best practices that you might want to employ. Okay, so to start with, I've now cleaned the casing. It doesn't have to be spotless, but I'll show you the inside. Okay, so that's the inside there. As you can see that the clean metal on the inside. Next thing I'm going to talk about then is the actual filter itself. The only downside to this particular filter compared to the old one is that the old one on this top here had two little holes where I could put a clip in so that when you take it out you can lift it out. This one doesn't have that on either end, so it just means when you take it out in the future you're just going to have to use your finger and just pull it out like that. Really simple, not going to teach you to suck eggs. Put your filter inside like that. It's on a bit of a spring, okay, so make sure it goes all the way in. Right, once that's in, then that's it done. You can just put this in dry like this, screw it in, then run the engine once it's full of oil and it will pump it through. However, I don't like to run it dry. What's actually sort of best practice and advised is if you use some of the new oil you're going to fill up the system with, and just sort of fill this up to about halfway. So at this point then, this is where the controversy starts. So oil is a little bit like coolant, and it's one of those subjects that a lot of people tend to have very strong opinions on. I'm going to tell you what the Bedford's RLHZ manual says, and then I'm going to tell you what I'm going to use. The manual says to use SAE 20W. 20W is a measure of the oil's viscosity. The W, just think of it as winter, so when it's cold temperatures. So the higher that number, it means the thicker the temperature. Of two numbers, you'll have a W number and a number without. That W number, think of it as winter. So basically, when the engine is cold, and in cold weather, how thick is that oil going to be? So remember, the higher the number, the thicker it is. So what you want is, when the engine is cold, you want that number to be pretty low. And the reason being, because when you're starting up an engine, you want the oil to get flowing as quickly as possible to start with. Then as the engine heats up, then you want it to maintain a slightly thicker consistency. The second number then, so 50 in this case, is the viscosity of the engine oil when it's at normal operating temperature. What have I gone for? So I've gone for 20W50. Again, in the manual it says SAE 20. Now, back in the 50s and 60s, again, there will be some of those who argue with this, but it's my opinion. Back in the 50s and 60s, SAE 20, especially when it comes to British engines of the time, means 20W50. You'll see this a lot. Vintage vehicles, and they've got a picture of like a 1920s or 1930s vehicle on the front. They slap a big price tag on it, and they say, oh, this is the oil you want for vintage vehicles. Absolute load of crap. Now, I've got nothing against this brand in particular or anything like that. It's just an example. So don't be fooled by classic and all this. You don't need to spend a lot of money on oil. This is really cheap. This isn't. This is incorrect. This, in my opinion, is correct. You'll hear as well, I'm sure there'll be someone furiously typing around in the comments now about the difference between mono-grade oils and multi-grade oils. Again, I'm not going to get into it. The most important thing with oil changes and maintaining the engine oil and any oil in general is not the amount of money you spend on the oil. It's not the amount of anti-corrosion that's put in there or all the additives that they trademark and brand and then sell to you for a ridiculous price. It's the change itself. It's a false economy to spend a load of money on a supreme long-lasting oil and then leave it in there for longer than you should. With this in particular, the RLHZ, if the pump is used for 50 hours static operation, then you also need to change the engine oil. Now I've bored you with a short story of oil. Okay, so again, just about halfway full. Okay, so that's now complete. Okay. Okay, that's finger tight. So I want the casing to be tight to help that rubber seal, but it doesn't need to be too tight. Get it finger tight, spinning it on, and then give it a couple of sort of half turns. So the next thing then is to refill the engine with fresh oil. So this is what came out of it. This is the old oil. So when I said it didn't look that bad, so even if I run it up the side, you can see then it's quite dark compared to the fresh oil, which you should be able to see under there. So you can see that it's more of an orange, more of like a sort of sunflower colour. So sort of the two beside each other, you can see there's quite a clear difference. The actual number then for the engine refill is 9.7 litres, but when completely empty it's about 10 litres. Obviously we've taken the filter out as well and replaced that, which is something I'd recommend doing when you change oil anyway. We'll fill it up. We know roughly what it's going to need, so we know it's empty. We know it's pretty much empty now, and I can definitely put the whole 5 litres in this first one. After that, if you look on the side of oil bottles, then you've usually got some form of markings that will break it down into litres or half a litre. We'll go with that when I think it's close, and then obviously we'll have to start the engine on and do checks and then top it up. So to fill up the oil then, just twist, really easy. Give it a bit of a wiggle. There you go, and that comes off. And in she goes. Oh, nice. Made a nice big mess there. It's 5 litres in. Okay, so that's 9 litres that we've put in. Plus, obviously, we've got some that's in the casing. Okay, so now I'm going to check the dipstick. Turns out, actually, that what I said earlier about taking this whole panel off You don't need to do it. There's a small little flap here that you can just release like that, and that's there for the dipstick. A lot easier. So I'll take that out. We'll wipe it off so we can get a nice accurate reading. Hope you can see that. We've got about half a finger from full, so that's pretty good. Okay, so we're adding another 1/4 of a litre just to bump it up a bit. Move on to the second last step, which is getting it run through the system. Okay, so we'll start her up. We'll let her idle for 2 to 3 minutes to pump all the new oil around. We'll recheck the dipstick then, because what that will do is then that will mean that the oil has gone through the sump, completely saturated the filter, and then pumped through the system, so which will probably take away a bit more oil. Then we can accurately see how much more oil we need, and then we'll top it up slightly, and that's us done. There's always that great fear when you start an engine after you've been doing some work on it that involves coolants or oils or any sort of liquid, because even though you know you've checked the manual 50 times and you might have worked in this vehicle so many times, there's always that thought of, oh no, have I just put the oil entirely wrong inlet? Thankfully, I haven't. Okay, so I've checked that oil level. So I'm going to add an additional half a litre, and that'll bring us up to just below that full line. Anytime you're filling oil, anytime you're replacing the canister, what you ideally should be doing is you should be be really overprotective of your engine, and by that what I mean is change your gloves every time you go to a different inlet or outlet point of the engine oil. Every time you transition from handling old oil and liquids to new liquids, put on a new pair of gloves. And this is to prevent you from, wiping your hands, whatever, picking up small filaments or even a tiny bit of stone or rust or something, and then going to screw something back in finger tight for you, tighten it with a wrench, and contaminating the fresh oil that you've put in there. Really, I should have been wearing vinyl gloves. These muck-off gloves, they're okay because the palm area and the fingers is it's got this rubber coating on it, so it's all waterproof. But the top here is just fabric, so if a spillage has gone onto this part of my hand, it's gonna get on my skin. It's not stuff you want to be, getting on your skin, getting in your eyes. It's certainly not ingesting. Obviously, another thing is you saw I made a bit of a mess on the ground, which I will clear up, and I'll clear it up for a few reasons. The first is if I was coming into a new area or a car park or a road, I don't want to drive over someone's old oil, just because it pretty much removes a lot of the grip I'm going to get on the road. The second reason is it is incredibly bad for the environment. Old oil, new oil, it is really bad for the environment. So make sure you get that cleared up. One of the best ways to get it cleared up is if you've got Fuller's Earth. Get a load of Fuller's Earth on it, and that will help soak it up, and then you can clear it up a lot easier then. Responsible disposal of oil. At the time, you can't just take it to your local council's recycling centre or waste centre. Just go to your local garage and say, look, I've got 5 litres or 10 litres, whatever, of old engine oil in these plastic bottles. How much? Because they'll go for engine oil all the time. As I've already mentioned as well, don't fall for the classic, oh, this is vintage oil, or this is oil specially designed for vintage cars. Yes, there are certain differences in terms of additives, etc. But the main thing with oil changes, getting economy, protecting your engine, is not the brand, is not the additives. It is changing it regularly. Okay, so thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you've got any comments, please feel free to leave them below. Don't forget, as I said earlier, please make sure you subscribe and like this video, because that will help me get seen more in the search results, and more people can watch these videos. The next video then is going to be a little bit different and quite nerdy. It's going to be based on UK law regarding blue lights and sirens and two-tone horns. All I'll say is there are a lot of misconceptions. Okay guys, so thanks for watching, and until then, see you next time.